Hello and welcome to Keeping It Young podcast, conversations about marriage, family, and ministry life. I'm Dave.
And I'm Bethany.
And we are the Youngs.
Welcome.
Thank you so much for joining us today. And it's just a real privilege and just a real privilege. Great opportunity for us to be able to serve.
Yes.
That's the word I'm looking for.
I could see across the table that you were struggling
wheels
there.
Were turning. It was my senior moment. That's not a good sign.
No.
Hey, thank you so much for all the messages we receive.
Yes, thank you.
Emails, the voicemails from I guess those are voicemails, aren't they, that we get from the podcast?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And it's always a privilege. We've gotten some just to write and say thank you, or we've had several people write and give us suggestions. We'd love to hear you talk about this, or we'd love to hear you talk about that. And even several of those we're working on. So some of those will be coming straight from your suggestions, some of our podcasts in coming weeks. And we're looking forward to all of that. And thank you so much for liking, for sharing.
Just for your encouragement.
And even for pastors, a lot of you pastors that have reached out, I actually have all of a sudden kind of been bombarded with pastors, asking for conferences or couples retreats. And just so you know, if you're listening and you haven't heard from me yet, I'm working on all of that.
We're getting there.
And our year is fairly full, if not completely filled this year, but we're working on things. And we've had several people suggest that we, consider even doing some live podcasting where we can have some meet and greets and get-togethers and things of that sort. Maybe a couples conference or a family conference in some places.
Yes.
So, we'll keep you aware of those things as time permits. And in the meantime, continue to like and share. And if we can be a blessing or help to you, we'd be happy to do so. Reach out to us.
Reach out.
And remember, the easiest way is just to visit keepingityoungpodcast.com and like and subscribe. But also go to the bottom right-hand corner and just double-click on that little microphone, and you can send us a message. And we listen to those and always enjoy them.
We do.
And every Facebook message, every one of those, we are very, very thankful. So here's where we've been. Let's just jump into today. And we've been talking about family success.
Yes, training our children.
Training our children. We covered obedience. We talked about winning our children to Jesus.
Yes.
That's been a blessing. We've had several follow-up on that. That's been.
Yes, I think we have talked a little bit about purity.
We have some, yes. And but really we've been talking about in the last 3 sessions, training our children to serve the Lord.
Yes.
Now there's one more area before we leave this family success, and we want to talk to you, and we're just going to call it training our children to succeed in life. You're aware, aren't you, that even the world around us, there's people that never go to church but still train their children to live a successful life.
Right.
And we are living in a culture to where that can be overlooked. I'm amazed, and this is not a judgment, it's just an observation. I'm amazed at how many young men I know who have never in their life changed a tire. My son and I were driving, I guess it was yesterday or day before yesterday, this past weekend anyway, and there was a man standing on the side of the road, and he obviously had a flat, and he was on his phone calling for help.
Right.
And I said to Jacob, I said, did you notice that man there? I mean, here's a guy that could change that tire himself within a matter of 10 or 15 minutes, but to call someone to come do it for you, whereas that may be convenient, is probably going to be an hour and a half.
Right.
And yet it's so easy, but it may have been. And Jacob has heard me talk about it, so he said, reckon he's one of those that doesn't know how. and maybe so, or maybe maybe he's paid up for somebody else to come do it, and he's willing to take the 2 hours.
Or maybe he didn't have a spare.
Maybe that's true, too. But it was a new car, so they're supposed to come with spares.
True.
And although you dads out there that have changed the tire on these new cars, whoever invented the jack systems on the cars, I really don't know what to think about them, because there's not much kind to say about them if you're out there trying to figure out how to make this jack work. But nonetheless, it's amazing that we live in a generation that we often can overlook that our children have to learn, not just to know our God and not just to go to church, but to succeed in life.
Yes.
So we're going to just talk maybe today and next week about this training our children for success.
All right.
Now, if you could think of areas, how many areas can we think of that would be important? Probably, if we sat down and tried, we could think of a ton.
Oh, my.
Because we could talk about finances.
Yes.
Oh, goodness, we could talk about education.
Taking care of a household.
Oh, there's so many things.
Yes.
But Bethany and I are really going to just probably deal with 3 in hopes that you'll run with it.
Yes.
That you'll think through. Recently I've taught my sons how to use a chainsaw. It's a very manly thing to do. And
yes.
And my my sons, several of them are teachers, I think, by spiritual gift, and our daughter's Charity's 12.
Yes.
And they taught her how to use an axe the other day. One of her
That
brothers.
was not my favorite.
And how to use a chainsaw. And she's so excited. and Mom was a little startled by that.
Yes.
But it is just a matter of teaching. And what an opportunity, Mom and Dad, you have to train and teach. You ever thought like this? Here I am trying to get work done, and this my kid's underfoot. I'm trying to vacuum, and my kid is here wanting to grab hold of the vacuum.
Right.
What a teaching moment. We're missing something.
What an
there.
opportunity.
Or, Dad, you're out in the garage working on something, and you got a little boy out there, and he doesn't know how to do it, and it's going to slow you down, but he will never know unless you slow down and take the time to teach.
Right.
And really, whatever you're doing, if you're cooking, you got a chance to teach.
Right.
If you're doing the finances, you have an opportunity to teach. If you're
Right.
working on the house, you have an opportunity to teach. I can drive a standard because my dad took the time to teach me about a clutch and a brake and an accelerator. And my wife can drive a standard because I took the time to teach.
Because my dad did not have the patience for that.
And God must have given me more patience there because Bethany can drive a standard. And I always thought she looked really good driving one of our big F550 pickup trucks with a 5-speed on the floor. And it was quite a womanly thing to do.
Well, it was just the expedient thing to
and
do.
it had to be done. But here's 3 areas. I'm thinking 3 areas: respect, purity, and work. 3 areas essential to train our children to succeed in life. Let's start with respect.
Yes.
And maybe, maybe you think, oh, you're talking about respect is essential to succeed in life. I think it is, because we live in a world that is harsh, bothered, angry, road rage, response,
Lots of
police officers are under attack, and and there's racial injustice issues.
Yes.
And a whole lot of this can be solved by teaching respect.
Yes.
So with our children, we wanted our children to respect. We never wanted to give them opportunities to look down on others, to treat others unkindly.
Yes.
And even with our children, recently we had a conversation in which I reminded our children who are here at home to smile, always smile at people.
Yes.
That's respect.
It is.
I work with churches all over the country, and especially with a lot of young people, and I'm amazed at how many teenagers, if they see you heading their way, will run. Or they very quickly look away in hopes that you won't speak to them.
Right, look at their phone.
Or if you go speak to them, you usually have to pull them out of the depths of social media. And it's obvious they don't want to come out of the depths of social media.
Right.
And so, and this is not a judgment necessarily. I was sitting at a traffic light yesterday, and I noticed that everybody at the traffic light was looking at their phone. Everybody. Nobody. There's cars around me with people in the car. Nobody's talking. Nobody's looking around. And so I even thought, maybe it's time that we look around and put it down.
And it's time to not be unsafe. That's very unsafe.
That's another thing there, yes. So the point we make with our children is one of the ways we show respect is we smile at people.
Yes.
There's you see people at church, maybe you don't know them and maybe you don't want to take the time to talk to them, but a smile goes a long way.
Goes a long way. Even just out in our culture, a smile can go a long way. There's so many bothered, sad people right now, fearful people, and a smile goes a long way.
It really does. I was in the Publix a few moments ago picking up some things for my wife, and there was an older couple. She had purple hair, and at least part of it was purple. And her husband, at least I'm assuming her husband, he was heavily tattooed. He's an older man, heavily tattooed. Had 2 very large golden hooped earrings in his left ear. Just obviously a little bit different. He had a Harley Davidson T-shirt on. And I smiled at them. And the next thing you know, we struck up a conversation because they were commenting on something that was in my shopping cart. And we stood by the cheese and had a long conversation. They're visiting here in our area because there is a knife and gun show this weekend, and they sell knives. They're here to sell knives.
Okay.
And we had an incredible, good conversation. I was able to give them a track, and it started with a smile.
Yes.
A smile is huge to teach your children to look around and smile and to speak first. That's something else I told our children. You speak first. And maybe all you got to do is say, hello, how are you? And sometimes you can get caught off guard by that because typically in our busy, hurried culture, hi, how are you is simply the anticipation is someone's going to say, hey, I'm fine, and keep moving.
Right.
But every so often you'll get somebody who will stop and say, do you really want to know?
Yes.
And respect is when I really want to know.
Yes.
We are called in God's word as a church, as the church, we're called to love each other.
Right.
To get to know each other.
Right.
And to care about each other. So smiling, speaking first, and talking is a matter of respect.
I was going to just insert here, in our culture right now during the pandemic time, a lot of counties or maybe cities have the mandate of wearing a mask, and that does make things a little more difficult. But you can smile with your eyes. If you put on a genuine smile, your face is all going to light up. And also you can talk. It is a little more difficult, and we all have our opinions about masks or no masks.
What's yours, sweetheart?
We won't go there with this menopausal woman in masks. But
hot flashes and masks do not make a good combination.
Not a good combination. But it does make it more difficult, and I have spiritually been a little grieved because it is more difficult to say, hey, do you go to church anywhere? Or, hey, can I pray with you about anything? Because you have a mask on and you feel a little muzzled. But don't let that stop you from being kind and respectful.
I have learned to be louder.
Yes.
Because the mask tends to muffle your words. So I greet people loudly these days.
Are you sure that's not your hearing?
I'm very sure that's not my hearing. It's on purpose. So what we're talking about here is training
respect. Back to the topic at hand.
Training our children to show respect. And there are other ways we did it as well. We never allowed our children to speak of our president by last name.
Yes.
Meaning we don't say Obama or Trump or Biden.
Mr.
We always said Mr. or President. So we always encouraged our children when we speak of President Obama to use his title.
Yes.
Because that shows a respect. There's a tendency in our culture, in our haste, to just say the last name or to roll our eyes and sarcastically say the last name.
Right.
But we wanted our children to know that even a person in a political party or a person in our own political party who may be doing things we don't agree with or who may have a personality that rubs us the wrong way, God called us to show respect.
Right.
The Bible is
an office
filled with commands about honor the king.
Yes.
And pray for those in authority.
Yes.
And respect the authority.
Read 1 Peter.
And that is very true. I just read that today, actually. And so President Obama, President Trump, even with police
Biden.
Officers, our children, would often say, oh, my word, the cop. And we say, no.
Policeman.
That is a police officer. Now, I know that COP stands for Constable on Patrol, is what I was told. Did I say that right? Constable?
I think so.
And but here in the United States, we don't call them constables on patrol, and so cop can be a very derisive,
derogatory.
It's, oh my word!
Yes.
And yet by just simply showing respect, by simply referring to them as a police officer, to show kindness, it makes a huge difference. And in our family, we've also tried to pray for our leaders. Even if we disagree with them, and especially if we disagree with them.
Yes.
The Bible is very clear that we are to pray for kings and for all that are in authority.
Right.
And we're to pray for them so that we can lead a quiet and peaceable life in all godliness and honesty. Paul taught that to Timothy. And I know that sometimes in political election years, and we just obviously had one, and the last few weeks have been challenging and rough on everybody.
Yes.
But one of the things that has helped our family is the many times in our family devotions that we've prayed for President Trump, for Vice President-elect Obama, or President Obama and Vice President-elect Biden, or even Kamala Harris, Mrs. Harris, as we prayed for them, that God would direct them, would lead them, and would help them to make decisions that allow us to lead a quiet and peaceable life in all godliness and honesty. He tells us to pray that, which implies if he tells us to pray that, then he will do it if we ask.
Yes.
And so respect is huge.
It is. And as you can see from our conversation here, that respect is not a respecter of persons. It's not, I will respect you if I look up to you, if I agree with you, if I like you. Respect is just across the board.
And in our family, respect even showed up with the yes, ma'am, yes, sir, no, ma'am, no, sir. And we could say a few words about that.
A constant ongoing I don't want to say battle in our home, but it's a constant ongoing reminder to our children and even to David and I. We strive not to say yeah to each other.
Yeah. That's awesome. Here's something that happened even this week. We're trying to remind our 7th grader to pick it up a little bit in that area.
Yes.
Yes, sir. And yes, ma'am. And so we've been recently at a funeral with our daughter and her husband. His daddy passed away.
Yes.
And so at a meal after the funeral, my oldest daughter, who lives now in California, where culturally things are very different in California than here where we live in Northwest Florida.
Right.
So we're aware of the culture differences. But in our culture of our home, one of the ways we show respect is to say, yes, ma'am. Yes. So our oldest daughter, had said something at the table to our youngest daughter, and she replied, yeah. And so her mom, Bethany, said to our youngest, yes, ma'am. And so our Charity says to her older sister, yes, ma'am. And our daughter reacted. She was like, oh, my word, she doesn't have to say yes, ma'am to me. See, I get it. My point being that culture does change. There's different places where they do things differently. People used to say to me, I was raised where we said yes, sir. And I don't know how many times in my life I've said to a guy, yes, sir. And he said to me, oh, my word, you don't have to call me sir. I work for a living. Now, I know what he meant. At least I had to find out, because that's the weirdest thing in the world, because the reason I'm showing you respect is because you work for a living. But one of the things I learned was that in the military, it was considered, you had to say yes, sir, to the sergeant. Mm-hmm. But all the people around you who actually did the work, you didn't have to say it to them necessarily.
Right.
And yet, I just think it's important. Beth and I would suggest to you, train your children to show respect. And let's do it at church.
Yes.
Train your children, when people at church speak to them, to stop what they're doing, look at them, smile at them, even to speak first to them. To
stand when they are spoken to.
To speak up so that older folks can hear.
Yes.
And this is a matter of showing respect. If your children are going to succeed in life, respect can take them a long ways.
It really can.
And it can make the difference in a job.
Yes.
It can help with even job advancement.
Yes.
It might even help calm a situation in which, maybe they're caught in a situation involving legal matters or the law, a police officer.
You can win people over by kindness and respect.
Respect is vital.
It is.
Let's move on from respect and take time here to grab the next one before we run out of time. Mm-hmm. We're talking about training our children to succeed in life.
Yes.
Respect is huge.
It is.
And I'm going to say that purity is. We live in a garbage-filled society.
Yes, we do.
It's a sexually addicted and a sexually addictive society.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And yet the Bible is so clear that we as God's people are to keep ourselves pure. Mm-hmm. We're to run from fornication. We're to flee fornication. Mm-hmm. We're to keep our hearts with all diligence, because the issues of life spill out of our hearts.
Yes.
And obviously you moms and dads who have younger children, you're to protect your children.
Yes.
So you just got to protect your children. We've talked about it in other of our podcasts, so we're not going to park too long on that. But here's a reminder: protect your children.
Yes.
You be careful. If your child has access to the internet, make sure it has a filter. Mm-hmm. And even with a filter, check up on it.
Absolutely.
Continually ask, continually. And moms and dads, it is vital now that you teach your children what to do if they're exposed to that which is inappropriate and ungodly and wrong. Because sometimes, a 6-year-old that stumbles on something scrolling through television channels by himself, or she finds something because she clicked on an advertisement at the bottom of a game.
Right.
And the next thing you know, it's open to something that's risque, that's inappropriate, that may be deadly.
Yes.
Teach your children what to do when that happens. And in our culture, you have to teach them. Bethany has recommended many times the book Good Pictures,
Bad Pictures. Yes.
And that's been a help. So obviously we want to protect our children, but it's more than that. To succeed in life, we have to teach our children to protect themselves.
Right. And you may be wondering, okay, I understand why purity would be an issue with success in our relationship with the Lord, but how is it an issue in everyday practical success in life? You want to answer that question?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Because the fact of the matter is, if a young person gets involved in that which is wrong, they get involved in, say, porn.
Yes.
Or they allow immoral relationships to characterize their teen years.
Yes.
It's going to damage their future marriage. Mm-hmm. It's going to eventually damage the children that they will be raising.
Yes.
And a lot of people in our generation shrugs their shoulders at the effect divorce has on children.
Mm.
And moms and dads, I'm not here to beat you up, but I will tell you, it's true that children learn how to cope with mom and dad no longer being married.
Yes.
They learn how to handle that.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, I will tell you, as an adult who works with people all the time, as a preacher who works with people all the time, I will tell you that there's a part of a child's heart that never is the same.
Mm-hmm.
Never.
Yes.
There are some things they will have to work through all the days of their life because issues of impurity are costly to marriage, to families, to churches.
Often to finances.
It can be to finances.
It can be to your job.
I know a man who was fired because porn was found on his office computer, and he had a very good job.
Yes.
And that was devastating for him to have to admit to his church why he was fired.
Right.
And to his wife.
Mm-hmm.
And to his grown children.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact of, all of a sudden you're minus income.
Mm.
This is a huge deal. So we want to teach our children to protect themselves.
Yes.
You do all that you can to protect them. We didn't let our children go to somebody else's house to spend the night.
Right.
With very rare exceptions and with definite standards in place that we knew our children would be protected.
Right. People that were family,
right. Or
like-minded family.
Very close family.
Yes.
And our goal with purity is that our children would buy into our plan.
Yes.
We want our children to buy in. So when our sons were younger, now there's some things that have changed, but when my sons were younger, they could get a phone. Once they're in the youth group, they could have a phone so that at any time, if they're on a youth activity, they could reach out to mom and dad if they needed me to come get them.
And because of our travels, sometimes they're with a youth group.
They're with a youth group we don't know and a place we don't know.
Yes.
So we wanted them to have access, but we would buy a flip phone. And the flip phone, all it could do was talk and text.
Yes.
And even then, our boys were not permitted to text girls.
Right.
And we go to youth camps, and I do have good-looking sons, I have to admit. And the girls would notice, all girls notice handsome, good-looking sons, especially if it's the speaker's sons.
Yes.
And they would always want, can I have your phone number? And our boys would have to say no.
Right.
And I know that was not easy, but I'm always thankful that God helped my boys to buy in to our plan of purity.
Right. And that goes back to having your child's heart, which we talked about several podcasts ago.
Even one of ours, and I mean, just to be very vulnerable here, one of ours did decide to go behind our backs about it. Mm. And interesting enough, one of the things Bethany and I recommend you do this. We've prayed about this. We have prayed many times, God, protect our children, help our children to do right, and if they do wrong, help them to get caught.
Yes.
We have prayed about that. And, God has answered that request many times.
Yes.
So one of ours did decide to go behind our backs and got caught. And you know what it was? It was a time for correction, but it was also an opportunity to teach.
Yes.
To help him now, okay, this is why it was wrong, and to go back to square one and train them. Now, not just in these are the right steps, but these are the steps to take to correct the wrong steps.
Yes.
So purity is a huge issue.
It is.
If you want your children to succeed in life, you've got to train respect and you've got to train purity.
Yes.
And so that they are showing respect, and not just to you, but to everybody around them, and they are pursuing purity on their own.
Right. It's ingrained in them so that when they leave your home, when they leave your protection, they are protecting themselves.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So I don't think we have time for the last one, so we'll jump into it next week. But any further thoughts as we're closing here, sweetheart, about respect and purity?
If you have any questions about that, you can certainly message us.
Sure.
And I recently did a guest podcast called the Friend to Friend podcast, and it's coming out.
That's friend to friend?
The Friend to Friend
okay.
podcast with Mrs. Jessica Smallwood. She just talks about all kinds of different issues affecting Christian ladies today, and we did a whole podcast on pornography and its result and how you can protect yourself and how you can protect your child. And I believe that mine is coming out the end of January. I'll check on that, but I think it's either the 21st or the 22nd. Friend to Friend podcast.
So find that and listen to that if you'd like to get some further thoughts on this issue of purity. Remember what we're talking about, training our children to succeed in life.
Yes.
And even the world can train these. This works. This is Christianity,
absolutely.
but it works across the board.
It does.
And join us next week because we're going to talk about a really big one. We'll spend an entire session on teaching our children to work. And that's going to be a good one. And your children are going to love us for sharing that one with you. Just a quick note here. I spoke with the family at a Christian ministry many years ago. And many of the parents in that Christian ministry send their kids to a particular academy.
Yes.
And later, after I'd spoken on the family quite extensively,
Yes.
one of the teachers at the academy was walking by a table of kids, and one of the kids, the teacher overheard one of the kids to say, "Have your parents been really hard on you since Dave Young spoke the other night?" And one kid said, "Yeah, I hate Dave Young." So we hope your kids don't hate us. But join us next week, and we'll look forward to sharing with you some truths on training your children to succeed in life by teaching them to work. Have a great day. It's been our privilege and our pleasure to serve you today.
The Keeping It Young podcast is a Bax 5 Media production. All rights reserved.